The Korean War has never formally ended, and for North Korea there's only one acceptable outcome: reunification under North leadership. Alarmingly, despite South Korea being protected by the might of the US military, it might be able to achieve this. North Korea views reunification not just as a matter of national pride, but of survival for the Kim regime. The situation in the North is bad, really bad, with even Pyongyang experiencing food shortages in recent years. The COVID pandemic also put a lot of pressure on the Kim regime, and as the South continues to prosper while the North stagnates, reunification by force may be the regime's last chance to stave off an insurrection. Standing in the way of reunification by force are about 600,000 South Korea troops and 50,000 American troops. The South fields a largely modern and capable military and has the explicit backing of the United States of America. Together, the two are a military juggernaut that the North can't hope to beat. Or could it? Because North Korea has some plans to either break this alliance or simply win before the US can bring its full might to bear. With over 1 million troops, North Korean forces outnumber the ROK's own by 300,000. Their equipment is outdated, and the bulk of their armored forces consist of Soviet-era T-62s. By comparison, the South fields the mighty K-2 battle tank, a fully modern and extremely capable system. North Korea's air force is antiquated and largely a token force, and its navy has a little bit of a punch, but is outclassed by the South. But the North has one thing going for it: a massive concentration of artillery that the South can't counter. Artillery has become the saving grace of failed militaries around the world, and nowhere is this better displayed than in Ukraine. After Russia failed at combined arms operations, its best tanks were eviscerated by American and British anti-tank missiles, and its air force failed to suppress Ukrainian ground forces. It went back to the type of fighting it knew best: indiscriminate and overwhelming firepower via artillery. With as much as a 20-to-1 advantage over Ukraine, Russian artillery has been able to grind the war to a slow, steady grind and prevent an embarrassing all-out rout. North Korea's artillery may be old, but the beauty of artillery is that it doesn't have to be very modern to be extremely lethal, especially when you have a huge amount of it. And North Korea has one of the biggest artillery forces anywhere in the world. That's not on accident. The nation has an estimated 5,000 self-propelled artillery pieces alongside 5,000 towed howitzers. It's the second largest stock of each system anywhere in the world, outclassed only by Russia. Its multiple rocket launcher system fleet is the third largest on Earth, with nearly 3,000 of those systems in its arsenal. North Korean artillery doesn't even come close to modern American systems like precision-guided HIMARS or Excalibur-guided shells, but they don't have to. With thousands of guns ready to go at a moment's notice, precision becomes irrelevant when you overwhelm your enemy with huge volleys of saturation fire. And North Korea is prepared to do just that. In fact, they count on this artillery to secure victory in a new Korean War, and they have one massive trump card over the US and ROK alliance. The city of Seoul is one of the most modern and prosperous in the world. It's also within the range of North Korea's long-range artillery stationed along the DMZ. With several million inhabitants, Seoul has been the one weakness in every war plan developed by America and the ROK. Multiple times in the last 30 years, the United States has been prepared to launch strikes against North Korea to punish it for its nuclear program and to attempt to destroy it in place. Each time, the South Koreans politely remind their American allies their capital was directly in range of North Korean guns. To counter the artillery threat, Seoul has built a large underground bunker system where its citizens can hide out for days if need be. They also have deployed significant counter-battery systems along the DMZ, with artillery units specifically trained and tasked with responding to northern fire and destroying the North's guns. The South Korean and US Air Forces are both prepared for rapid response missions across the vast DMZ to eliminate northern batteries. But the North isn't ignorant to these plans, and it has its own in order to extend the survivability of its big guns. First, North Korea would immediately target Seoul with its longest-range guns. Equipped with incendiary munitions, the damage would be catastrophic, and not all civilians could hope to get to safety before the rounds started raining down around them. It's estimated that North Korea could deliver several thousand rounds in an hour to the city. Even with US ROK counter-battery fire, an estimated 40% of the city would be destroyed in the opening hours of a new war, leading to catastrophic economic damage for the South. Second, North Korea is guaranteed to use various chemical and possibly even biological agents in the opening hours of its attack. With a fleet of an estimated 600 Scud missile launchers, North Korea would target ports, train stations, and airports with chemical and biological weapons in order to paralyze the South's transportation networks. The aim would be to make escape impossible for South Korean citizens. Much like Russia, North Korea views civilians as a legitimate target for war and a way to force its enemy into concessions. Trapping South Korean citizens in Seoul and other major cities would be of greater strategic value to the North than destroying ROK military facilities themselves. The North would attempt to negotiate for peace under its own terms by holding South Korea's citizens hostage, or at the very least, would seek to limit U.S. involvement. The United States would have to carefully weigh the global optics in its response to the North. If its involvement guarantees the death of hundreds of thousands or even millions of ROK citizens, it'll cost the U.S. politically and might even erode public support for intervention back home. Next, chemical weapons with persistent agents that can last for days would be used against the ROK in U.S. air bases near the DMZ. North Korean victory would rely on it quickly taking Seoul and then holding it hostage, forcing the South to sue for peace and the U.S. to stay away by threatening the death of millions of Seoul civilians. However, the biggest threat to this plan is Allied air power, and thus it would be critical to shut down airfields near the DMZ quickly as possible to prevent rapid response strikes. Persistent agents delivered via ballistic missiles would ensure that airfields remain inoperable and aircraft themselves require extensive decontamination efforts. Allied air power would be forced to fly from airfields further to the south or even completely out of the country for the U.S., significantly slowing mission sortie rates and response times. Shutting down Allied air power is of critical importance to the North because the terrain leading from the north to the south is very difficult, and large offensives could only take place via half a dozen or so routes through the hills and mountains. This would create a dangerous bottleneck of forces, which could be devastated by superior air power, much as we saw retreating Iraqi forces annihilated by the infamous Highway of Death leading out of Kuwait. But even with runways operational, the Allies might have trouble flying strike missions against Northern forces. The DMZ is home to a very dense network of northern air defenses, and while these are largely old Soviet-era models, as we've seen in Ukraine weapons like the S-300, it's still a significant threat to modern aircraft. The United States has tools to operate in such highly contested environments, but this would force it to rely on the F-22, F-35, and B-2 stealth bomber. The B-2 is too few in number to stem the tide of northern forces and would already be tasked with delivering decapitation strikes against the Kim regime and destroying its nuclear weapons infrastructure. This would leave the F-22 and the F-35 to respond, and neither aircraft is capable of bringing the type of firepower needed to stop a million-strong army equipped with over 6,000 tanks. Sure, North Korean tanks might be relics, but they are still tanks, and there's 6,000 of them, most of which would be surging towards Seoul or fixing Southern forces to prevent them reinforcing the Seoul axis. What the US and South Korea needs is the American B-52 bomber. This is the world's preeminent bomber aircraft, capable of bringing the pain in the form of 70,000 pounds of high explosives per aircraft. But it's the actual weapons that really matter here, and the United States Air Force has weapons specifically designed to devastate large armored formations. During the Second Gulf War, a single Marine recon platoon in unarmored Humvees ran into an entire Iraqi armored foundation. The Marines called in fire support from a loitering B-52, which dropped 4 CBU-97 cluster munitions. Inside each 1,000-pound bomb are 40 sensor-fused projectiles known as skeets, which, when dispersed over an area, automatically target armored vehicles and destroy them from above. The Iraqi armored formation was immediately forced to retreat after losing approximately half of their vehicles in the first attack. These types of weapons, which the US has in the thousands, would devastate North Korean armored formations, but the United States would have to carefully weigh the costs. Without stealth, B-52s are nothing more than big bomb trucks and significantly threatened by even older ground-based air defenses. While B-52s in Vietnam showed they were able to deploy electronic countermeasures to dramatically increase their survivability and limit casualties while bombing the densest North Vietnamese air defense zones, the US would still have to carefully consider how much of its bomber fleet it's willing to sacrifice to try to stop Northern armor, and if it would be even able to bring enough aircraft to the fight to do so. That's why the US would be limited to flying missions from outside of South Korea, basing these mighty B-52s from Japan and Guam. This limits how many of the aircraft can be brought and stored in theater, and dramatically lowers sortie rates as the big bombers are forced to fly further. To further disrupt the Allies' response, North Korea would immediately deploy the largest special purpose forces in the world. With an estimated 60,000 Special Forces operators, Northern SOF would infiltrate the South in advance of any attack or immediately before one is launched. Dressed in civilian clothing or stolen ROK uniforms, North Korean special forces would conduct a massive campaign of sabotage and disruption, significantly complicating a military response by the South. And North Korea has multiple ways of getting its special forces into the South, unseen even by sophisticated ROK and US surveillance tech. North Korea maintains a small fleet of biplanes. With canvas skin, these aircraft are throwbacks to World War I and of zero military threat to the South, except for one unique feature. Because they fly low, very slow, and have very few metal parts, these biplanes are incredibly difficult to locate and track with search radars, let alone target with modern air defense missiles. North Korean forces are trained to parachute out of these antiquated planes, and hundreds of them could probably manage the task even under cover of night. The second intrusion vector into the South would be via a fleet of mini submarines that the North operates. Some of these are large enough to pose a threat to Allied ships, but many more are designed to take squads of soldiers past the 38th parallel and to the southern beaches. Operating in very shallow water, these small subs would basically be undetectable, and only vigorous beach patrols could hope to stop infiltration using these craft, diverting badly needed manpower from the war spilling across the DMZ. On the DMZ itself, though, North Korea has yet another infiltration vector, though it's not known just how active it remains today. Throughout the 90s, the ROK forces discovered multiple tunnels that the North had dug right under the DMZ. Some of these were big enough to allow for an estimated 3,200 soldiers to pour through them per hour, completely bypassing the dense defenses of the DMZ itself. Such a force could wreak havoc behind enemy lines, and while they would be largely engaging in suicide attacks, heavy indoctrination has prepared North Korean special forces for the sacrificial task. No new tunnels have been discovered since the 2000s, but that doesn't mean they haven't been built. Disruption is the name of the game for North Korea, and of its strategic goals in the invasion of the South, none is more important than knocking the US out of the fight and keeping it out. To achieve this, North Korea needs to shut down major southern ports, which would allow for the offloading of large amounts of American troops and equipment. The US could surge several thousand light infantry via its large air transport fleet, but bringing America's mighty armored division into the fight would require approximately 60 days. This would leave the North with just under 2 months to shut down the South's major ports. Normally, incoming reinforcements would be better intercepted at sea. North Korea does have a small fleet of diesel submarines, but these subs have short ranges and are not very sophisticated. They would be better used laying silently in ambush to attempt to intercept ROK and US naval forces pushing north past the DMZ to unleash volleys of cruise missile attacks. Even then, they would not survive for long up against both fleets' anti-submarine assets. Instead, North Korea would need to shut down the port facilities themselves. This is where the use of chemical weapons would once more come into play, with the aim of contaminating disembarking points for US troops. The US and South Korea have formidable air defenses, including the Patriot air defense system, but North Korea is prepared to launch massive volleys of ballistic missiles in order to overwhelm the southern air defense network. And amongst those incoming ballistic missiles would inevitably be multiple nuclear weapons. It's believed that by now the North has miniaturized its arsenal of a few dozen nuclear weapons, enough to load on medium-range missiles. It might even be able to threaten the west coast of the United States itself, but the North's nukes are better suited for knocking out port facilities and military airfields in the south. The Kim regime is likely fully prepared to do so, as there is no chance that the Kim family would survive a failed war. Not only do both the US and South Korea have decapitation strike plans in place using bombers, cruise missiles, and special forces to eliminate the Kims on the onset of the war, but a failed war to reunify the South with the North could end up in catastrophic and apocalyptic defeat for the North. Many in the higher echelons of power in Pyongyang would eliminate the Kim regime long before American Abrams and South Korean K-2 tanks started rolling into the city. For North Korea, the outbreak of war is an all-or-nothing affair, with national survival at stake. The use of nuclear weapons is thus naturally assumed. Now, go check out China versus United States. Who would win World War III? Or click this other video instead.